The crack of breaking glass echoed through the narrow canyon as Zelda Atwood stumbled down the rocky slope, her wedding dress torn at the hem and caked with dust from 3 days of desperate flight. Her bare feet bled through makeshift wrappings of petticoat fabric, and bruises in the shape of fingerprints circled her wrists like cruel jewelry. But she kept moving because stopping meant death or something worse. The Wyoming territory stretched endlessly before her, all red rock and sagebrush under a merciless sun that had already blistered her shoulders through the thin cotton of her dress. She had stolen away in the middle of the night from the mining camp, where Marcus Dennison had kept her prisoner for 8 months of their marriage, taking nothing but the clothes on her back and a desperate prayer that God might show mercy to a woman with nowhere left to turn. The settlement of Medicine Bow appeared like a mirage through the heat shimmer, its wooden buildings huddled together along the Union Pacific Railroad tracks. Zelda's vision swam as she staggered toward the main street, her body finally giving out after days of walking through the wilderness. She collapsed against a hitching post outside what looked like a general store, her fingers clutching the weathered wood as her knees buckled beneath her. Miss, are you all right?" A man's voice cut through the ringing in her ears, rough but concerned. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground completely. "Jesus, you're burning up." Zelda tried to focus on the face above her, taking in impressions of sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and eyes the color of good whiskey. He wore a dusty work shirt and leather chaps, a cowboy by the look of him, and she wanted to warn him away, to tell him that helping her would only bring trouble. But her tongue felt thick and useless in her mouth. "I've got you," the cowboy said, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all. "Doc Harrington's place is just up the street. Can you tell me your name?" "Zelda," she managed to whisper before darkness claimed her entirely. She woke to the smell of clean sheets and carbolic soap, sunlight streaming through lace curtains that moved gently in a breeze. For one confused moment, she thought she was back in her childhood home in St. Louis before reality crashed down on her. Zelda sat up too quickly, her head spinning, and a woman's voice called out from somewhere nearby. "Easy now. You have been out for nearly a full day." An older woman with silver hair pinned in a neat bun entered the room carrying a tray with a steaming bowl. "I am Mrs. Harrington. My husband is the town doctor. You gave us quite a scare, young lady." "Where am I?" Zelda's voice came out as a croak. "Medicine Bow, Wyoming territory." "You are in the spare room behind my husband's office. The young man who brought you in has been checking on you every few hours, worried sick." Mrs. Harrington set the tray on a small table beside the bed. "This is chicken broth. You need to get your strength back. You were severely dehydrated and your feet are in terrible shape. My husband had to remove several thorns and clean out quite a bit of dirt." Zelda looked down at her bandaged feet, then at her hands, which someone had washed and wrapped where the skin had split. She wore a clean nightgown that was not her own. "The man who found me, what did he look like?" "Yates Turner. He works the Double T Ranch about 5 miles west of town. Good man, one of the best we have around these parts. He found you collapsed outside Patterson's store yesterday morning, Mrs." Harrington handed her the bowl and a spoon. "Now eat. You can barely keep your eyes open." The broth was rich and savory, and Zelda found herself eating ravenously despite her fear. "I need to leave," she said between mouthfuls. "I cannot stay here. It is not safe." "Not safe from what, dear Mrs.?" Harrington's eyes were kind but sharp. "Or should I ask from whom?" Before Zelda could answer, a knock sounded at the door and Dr. Harrington entered, a man in his 60s with spectacles perched on his nose. Behind him stood the cowboy from her fragmented memories. He was taller than she had realized, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and work-roughened hands that he held his hat with obvious nervousness. "Miss, this is Yates Turner," Dr. Harrington said. "He has been quite concerned about your welfare." Yates stepped forward, his expression earnest. "I did not mean to intrude, but I wanted to make sure you were all right. You were in bad shape when I found you." "Thank you," Zelda said quietly. "I am grateful for your help truly, but I should go. I have already caused you enough trouble." "Go where?" Yates asked, his brow furrowing. "You can barely stand. And forgive me for being direct, but you did not get those bruises from a simple fall." Zelda's hand instinctively went to her wrist where Marcus's grip had left its mark. "That is none of your concern." "Maybe not, but I made it my concern when I picked you up off that street." Yates moved closer, his voice gentle despite his words. "Look, I do not know your story, and you do not have to tell me if you are not ready, but I can see you are running from something or someone. This is a good town, full of good people. Let us help you." "You do not understand," Zelda said, her voice breaking. "My husband, he will come looking for me. He is not a man who lets go of what he considers his. I have to keep moving." "Your husband did this to you, Mrs. Harrington asked, her voice hardening. Zelda nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks despite her best efforts to hold them back. "Marcus Dennison. He works a claim up near South Pass City. He has friends, men who owe him favors. When he finds out I ran, he will not stop until he drags me back." "Over my dead body," Yates said flatly. "Pardon my language, madam, but no man has the right to lay hands on a woman like that, husband or not." Dr. Harrington adjusted his spectacles. "I have treated enough women with similar injuries to know what we are dealing with here. Yates is right. You should stay in medicine, Bo, where people can keep an eye out for you. My wife and I have this spare room, and you are welcome to it as long as you need." "I have no money to pay you," Zelda protested weakly. "We will figure something out," Mrs. Harrington said firmly. "Perhaps once you are healed, you can help me with some of the household work. I am not as young as I used to be, and these old bones get tired." "I can work," Zelda said quickly. "I can cook and clean and sew. I do not want charity." "It is not charity, it is Christian decency, Mrs. Harrington replied. "Now finish that broth and get some more rest. We can discuss the details later." Yates cleared his throat. "If it is all right with you, Miss Zelda, I would like to stop by tomorrow to check on you. I know a man over at the railroad office who might have worked for someone with a neat hand. They are always looking for someone to help with correspondence and record keeping." "You have already done so much," Zelda said, overwhelmed by the kindness these strangers were showing her. "Not nearly enough," Yates replied, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Get some rest. I will see you tomorrow." After he left, Mrs. Harrington helped Zelda settle back against the pillows. "That young man has a good heart," she said. "He lost his own mother to a violent man when he was just 16. Found work on the Double T and has been there ever since. The owner, Theodore Thatcher, treats him like a son. Yates has spent the last 8 years working that ranch and saving every penny. I suspect he is planning to start his own spread someday." "How old is he?" Zelda asked, then felt her cheeks flush at her own curiosity. 24, I believe. A few years older than you, I would wager. How old are you, dear?" 22. Zelda closed her eyes. "I married Marcus when I was 21. He seemed charming when we met in St. Louis. My parents had just died from typhoid and I had no other family. He promised me a new life out west. I was such a fool. You were vulnerable and he took advantage of that." "That does not make you a fool, it makes him a monster." Mrs. Harrington patted her hand. "Sleep now. Tomorrow will be better, I promise." But sleep was hard to find. Every time Zelda closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's face twisted with rage, felt his fists connecting with her ribs, heard his voice telling her that she belonged to him and no one else would ever want damaged goods like her. She had tried to leave twice before. The first time, he had found her within hours and broken her arm. The second time, he had locked her in their cabin for 3 weeks, visiting only to bring food and remind her of what happened to wives who disobeyed their husbands. This time, she had waited until he left for a week-long trip to Cheyenne to sell gold dust. She knew she had maybe a 10-day head start at best. Morning came with the sound of roosters crowing and wagons rattling past on the main street. Zelda woke feeling marginally better, though her feet still throbbed and her body ached. Mrs. Harrington brought her breakfast and helped her wash up, then produced a simple blue cotton dress that she said would fit well enough until they could make or acquire more suitable clothing. "I have some fabric in my sewing room," Mrs. Harrington said. "If you are handy with a needle, we can make you a proper wardrobe. A woman needs more than one dress." "I can sew," Zelda assured her. "My mother taught me when I was young. I used to make all my own clothes before. They spent the morning going through patterns and fabric, and Zelda found herself relaxing slightly in the comfortable domesticity of the task. Mrs. Harrington was an easy woman to talk to, asking no prying questions but offering quiet support. Around midday, a knock at the door announced Yates's arrival. He had cleaned up since yesterday, his hair still damp from washing and his shirt freshly pressed. He held his hat in both hands and looked almost nervous. "Good afternoon, ladies. I hope I am not interrupting." "Not at all, Mrs. Harrington said warmly. "Come in, Yates. I just made coffee." "I actually came to see if Miss Zelda might be up for a short walk," Yates said. "Nothing strenuous, just maybe down to the railroad office and back. I spoke with Mr. Callahan yesterday, and he said he would like to meet you if you are interested in that clerk position." "I do not know if I should be out where people can see me," Zelda said hesitantly. "The sooner folks in town know you are here and under protection, the better," Yates replied. "Medicine Bow is not a big place, but it is full of decent people who look out for their own. Once they know your situation, I guarantee no stranger will be able to set foot in this town without someone taking notice." Dr. Harrington, who had just returned from a house call, nodded his agreement. "Yates is right. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. If this husband of yours comes looking, he will find a united front waiting for him." Zelda looked down at her bandaged feet. "I am not sure I can walk that far." "I have a solution for that," Yates said with a slight smile. "If you will permit me, I can carry you." "It is not that far, and my shoulders are broad enough for the task." "I cannot ask you to do that," Zelda protested, mortified. "You are not asking, I am offering." Yates's expression was gentle but firm. "Let people see that you have friends here, Miss Zelda. Let them see that you are not alone." Something about the earnestness in his voice made her relent. Mrs. Harrington helped her into the blue dress and a pair of soft slippers that fit over the bandages. Then Yates carefully lifted her into his arms. He was warm and solid, and Zelda found herself acutely aware of his heartbeat beneath her ear as he carried her out into the bright June sunshine. Medicine Bow was a small but bustling town, its main street lined with businesses catering to both railroad workers and local ranchers. People stopped to stare as Yates carried her past, and more than one called out a greeting or concerned question. Yates answered them all with the same simple explanation that she was new to town, had arrived in poor condition, and would be staying with Doc Harrington for a while. He said nothing about her past, but something in his tone discouraged further probing. The railroad office was a sturdy building near the depot, and Mr. Callahan turned out to be a portly man in his 50s with a thick mustache and kind eyes. "Miss Atwood, pleased to meet you," he said, shaking her hand after Yates had set her carefully in a chair. "Yates tells me you might be interested in some clerical work." "Yes, sir," Zelda replied. "I have a good hand and I am familiar with bookkeeping. My father ran a dry goods store in St. Louis before he passed, and I helped him with his ledgers." "That is exactly what I need," Mr. Callahan said enthusiastically. "The railroad has me drowning in paperwork. Freight manifests, passenger logs, telegrams, and correspondence. I could use someone with neat handwriting and an organized mind. The pay is $30 a month, 6 days a week, 4 hours a day. Does that sound agreeable?" $30 was more money than Zelda had seen in months. Marcus had controlled every penny they had, doling out small amounts for groceries and necessities while spending the rest on whiskey and gambling. "That sounds more than fair, Mr. Callahan. When would you like me to start? How about Monday?" "That gives you a few more days to get your feet healed up proper. Yates can bring you over in the morning and collect you after your shift. We will start you off easy and see how it goes." "Thank you," Zelda said, feeling tears prick her eyes again. "I truly appreciate the opportunity." "We take care of our own around here," Mr. Callahan said simply. "Now you get yourself healed up, and I will see you Monday morning." Yates carried her back to the Harringtons' house, taking a slightly longer route that allowed more people to see them. At the general store, he stopped to introduce her to Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, who immediately insisted on extending her credit for any necessities she might need. At the saloon, he spoke briefly with the owner, a woman named Delilah Mason, who ran the cleanest establishment between Cheyenne and Laramie. Even the blacksmith, a huge man named Samuel with arms like tree trunks, came out of his shop to be introduced and offer his services should she need anything made or mended. By the time they returned to the doctor's house, Zelda's head was spinning with names and faces. "Why are you doing this?" she asked Yates as he set her down in a chair on the front porch. "Why are all these people being so kind to me? They do not even know me." Yates settled onto the porch railing, his expression serious. "I told you about my mother. What I did not say is that when she finally tried to leave my father, nobody helped her. Our neighbors looked the other way. The sheriff said it was a domestic matter and not his concern. She made it 3 miles down the road before he caught up with her. I was working in the barn when I heard the gunshot." Zelda's hand flew to her mouth. "Yates, I am so sorry. I was 16 years old, and I swore that day that if I ever had the chance to help someone in the same situation, I would do everything in my power to protect them." He looked directly at her, his amber eyes fierce. "You are not alone anymore, Zelda. This town, these people, we are not going to let anything happen to you. Your husband will have to go through all of us to get to you. But what if he brings men with him? What if people get hurt because of me? Then we will deal with that when it happens. But I do not think it will come to that. Bullies like your husband are cowards at heart. They prey on the weak and vulnerable. When they are faced with real opposition, they usually back down." Yates leaned forward, his voice softening. "You are safe here, Zelda. I need you to believe that." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe that she could actually have a life here, that she could be free of Marcus's shadow. "I will try," she whispered. "That is all I ask." Yates stood, settling his hat back on his head. "I need to get back to the ranch, but I will come by tomorrow afternoon if that is all right. Maybe we can sit on this porch and you can tell me about St. Louis. I have never been east of the Mississippi." "I would like that," Zelda said, and was surprised to find that she meant it. The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Zelda's feet healed slowly but surely under Dr. Harrington's care, and she threw herself into helping Mrs. Harrington with the household work. She cooked and cleaned, learning the quirks of the wood stove and the best way to get bloodstains out of the doctor's shirts. In the afternoons, Yates would visit, and they would sit on the porch talking while Mrs. Harrington smiled knowingly from inside the house. Zelda learned that Yates had been born in Kansas, that his father had been a farmer who drank too much and blamed his failures on everyone but himself. After his mother's death, Yates had taken what little money she had hidden away and headed west, eventually landing at the Double T Ranch where Theodore Thatcher had taken a chance on an angry, grieving 16-year-old boy and given him purpose. "Theodore taught me everything I know about cattle and horses," Yates told her one afternoon as they watched the sun paint the sky gold and orange. "He is a tough old man, but fair. He pays his hands well and expects honest work in return. I have been saving most of my wages. In another year or two, I should have enough to buy my own land and start a small herd." "That sounds like a good dream," Zelda said softly. She was working on a piece of embroidery, her hands finally steady enough for the delicate work. "Do you know where you want to settle?" "There is a valley about 10 miles north of here, good water and grass. The land is still available through the Homestead Act. I could file a claim and build a cabin, start with maybe 50 head of cattle and grow from there." He glanced at her, then quickly looked away. "It is probably foolish, a cowboy thinking he can be a rancher." "It is not foolish at all," Zelda said firmly. "My father started with nothing but determination and a push cart full of goods. He built a successful business through hard work and careful planning. You can do the same." "Did you, before you married, did you have dreams of your own?" Yates asked, Zelda's hands stilled on her needlework. "I wanted to be a teacher. There was a normal school in St. Louis that accepted women. I was saving money to attend when my parents got sick. After they died, I just felt so lost. Marcus seemed like a lifeline at the time. He said he would take care of me, that I would never have to worry about anything again." She laughed bitterly. "I suppose he was right in a way. When you are locked in a cabin, you do not have much to worry about except survival." "That was not care, that was captivity," Yates said quietly. "You deserve so much better than what he gave you." "I do not know what I deserve anymore," Zelda admitted. "Some days I wonder if I brought this on myself by being too naive, too trusting." "Stop right there." Yates's voice was sharp enough to make her look up in surprise. "You did nothing wrong. He is the one who lied and manipulated and hurt you. That is on him, not you. Do not you dare take responsibility for his cruelty." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made something warm unfurl in Zelda's chest. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. For finding me, for helping me, for just sitting here and talking to me like I am a real person and not just some broken thing." "You are not broken," Yates said, moving from the railing to crouch beside her chair so they were eye to eye. "You are strong and brave and beautiful, and anyone who cannot see that is a damned fool." Their faces were inches apart, and Zelda found herself noticing the gold flecks in his eyes, the way his hair curled just slightly at his temples, the fullness of his lower lip. Her heart was beating too fast, and when Yates reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, she felt the touch all the way to her toes. "Yates," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. He seemed to understand anyway. "I know the timing is terrible, and I have no right to have these feelings when you are still healing from what he did to you. But I need you to know that when I look at you, I see someone extraordinary. I see someone worth protecting, worth knowing, worth caring about. And if you ever decide you might want more than just friendship from me, I will be the luckiest man in Wyoming territory." Before Zelda could respond, the sound of horses approaching made them both turn. A group of riders was coming down the main street, 4 men on horseback, and even from a distance, Zelda could see the rigid way they sat their saddles, the purposeful way they moved. Her blood turned to ice water. "He is here," she breathed, her embroidery falling forgotten to the porch floor. "Yates, that is Marcus, the one on the bay horse in front." Yates was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the revolver at his hip. "Get inside. Go to the back room and stay there." "He will hurt you," Zelda said, panic making her voice shake. "He has 3 men with him. And I have a whole town behind me." Yates's expression was grim but determined. "Go inside now, Zelda. Let me handle this." Dr. Harrington appeared at the door, clearly having heard the commotion. "Come on, my dear, Yates is right. You should not be out here for this." Zelda wanted to argue, but she knew her presence would only make things worse. She let Dr. Harrington pull her inside, but she stayed at the window where she could see what was happening. Mrs. Harrington joined them, her face worried but resolute. The 4 riders pulled up in front of the house. Marcus Dennison was everything Zelda remembered and feared. A tall man with dark hair and cruel eyes, his face weathered by sun and hard living. The men with him looked like the kind of rough characters who made their living on the wrong side of the law, all carrying guns and wearing expressions that suggested they were eager to use them. "Where is my wife?" Marcus demanded without preamble, his voice carrying clearly through the open window. "I know she is here. I have been tracking her for days, and someone in Cheyenne told me a woman matching her description was seen in Medicine Bow." "If you are referring to Miss Zelda Atwood, she is under the protection of this town," Yates said calmly, his hand still near his gun. "And she is not going anywhere with you." "Miss Atwood," Marcus laughed harshly. "Her name is Mrs. Dennison, and she is my wife by law. I have every right to take her home." "You have no rights where she is concerned," Yates replied. "I have seen the bruises you left on her. Dr. Harrington can testify to her injuries. You beat and terrorized that woman, and now you want to drag her back for more of the same. That is not happening." By now, people were emerging from the buildings along the main street, drawn by the confrontation. Mr. Patterson came out of his store with a shotgun. Samuel, the blacksmith, appeared with a massive hammer in one hand. Delilah Mason stood on the saloon porch with her arms crossed, and even Mr. Callahan from the railroad office had come to see what the commotion was about. "This is a private matter between a man and his wife," Marcus said, his eyes darting nervously as he realized the gathering crowd. "It has nothing to do with any of you. It became our business when she arrived here beaten half to death," Dr. Harrington called out from his doorway, his normally mild voice sharp with anger. "I have treated battered women before, Mr. Dennison, but the injuries your wife sustained were among the worst I have seen. Broken ribs that healed poorly, evidence of repeated trauma, signs of starvation and dehydration. You are lucky I am a doctor and bound by my oath, because if I were not, I would thrash you within an inch of your life right here in the street." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Marcus's face darkened with rage. "She is a liar and a thief. She ran off with money that belonged to me. I want her back, and I want what she stole." "I did not steal anything," Zelda called out before she could stop herself, stepping onto the porch despite Mrs. Harrington's restraining hand. "I left with nothing but the dress on my back. You controlled every penny we had, and you spent it all on whiskey and cards. I did not even take food because I was too afraid of what you would do if you noticed anything missing." "Zelda, get back inside," Yates said urgently, but it was too late. Marcus had seen her, and his expression turned murderous. "There you are, you ungrateful bitch," he snarled, starting to dismount. "You are coming with me right now. Touch that woman and it will be the last thing you ever do." Sheriff William Crawford pushed through the crowd, his badge glinting in the sunlight. He was an older man with iron gray hair and a weathered face, but his hand was steady on his gun. "Mr. Dennison, I am Sheriff Crawford, and you are not welcome in my town. I suggest you and your friends turn those horses around and head back the way you came." "She is my wife," Marcus insisted. "I have a marriage certificate." "A piece of paper does not give you the right to abuse another human being," Sheriff Crawford replied. "Miss Atwood has made it clear she does not wish to return with you. As far as I am concerned, that is the end of the matter. Now leave, before I arrest you for disturbing the peace." "On what grounds? I have not done anything wrong." "Then you will not mind if I search your saddlebags," the sheriff said mildly. "See, I got a telegram from South Pass City a few days ago. Seems there is some question about whether the claim you have been working is actually yours. The original owner's family says you ran him off at gunpoint and stole his stake. If I were to find any evidence of that claim jumping on your person, I would have to detain you." Marcus's face went pale, then flushed dark red. "You have no proof of anything." "Maybe not, but I am willing to investigate. Are you willing to stick around while I do? Because I am happy to provide you with accommodations in my jail while I sort through the details." Sheriff Crawford's smile did not reach his eyes. "Or you can ride out now, and we can all forget this unfortunate visit ever happened." The three men with Marcus were looking increasingly uncomfortable, clearly not eager to get involved with the law. One of them muttered something about not signing up for this kind of trouble. Marcus's eyes found Zelda's across the distance, and the hatred there made her flinch. "This is not over," he said coldly. "You are still my wife. I will come back with a judge's order if I have to." "Good luck with that," Sheriff Crawford said. "Most judges in this territory take a dim view of men who beat their wives. And even if you did manage to find one sympathetic to your cause, you would still have to get past every person in this town. We protect our own, Mr. Dennison. Remember that." For a long moment, it seemed like Marcus might try something foolish. His hand twitched toward his gun, and Zelda saw Yates tense, ready to draw. But then one of Marcus's companions grabbed his arm and said something low and urgent. Marcus shook him off but seemed to think better of whatever he had been planning. "Keep the whore," he spat. "She was not worth the trouble anyway. Nothing but a mousy little thing who could not even keep house properly." "Get out of my town," Sheriff Crawford said, his voice hard as iron. "And if I catch wind of you anywhere near Medicine Bow again, I will throw you in jail and lose the key. That is a promise." Marcus jerked his horse's head around so hard the animal snorted in protest, then spurred it into a gallop. His three companions followed, and within moments they were disappearing in a cloud of dust down the road toward Cheyenne. Zelda found herself shaking so hard she had to grab the porch railing for support. Yates was there in an instant, his arm around her waist, holding her steady. "It is all right," he murmured. "He is gone. You are safe." "He said he would come back with a judge," Zelda said through chattering teeth. "What if he does? What if the law says I have to go back to him?" "Then we will deal with that when it happens," Sheriff Crawford said, climbing the porch steps. "But for what it is worth, Miss Atwood, I have been enforcing the law in Wyoming territory for 15 years. I have seen men like your husband before. They are bullies who prey on the weak, but when faced with real opposition, they usually slink away to find easier targets. I do not think he will be back. But he is right. I am still legally married to him," Zelda said miserably. "I have no grounds for divorce. I never committed adultery or anything else that would allow me to dissolve the marriage. Actually, you might have more options than you think, Doctor." Harrington said thoughtfully. "The territorial legislature passed a law last year expanding the grounds for divorce. Extreme cruelty is now considered sufficient cause. With my medical testimony and the sheriff's report of today's confrontation, You could petition for dissolution of your marriage." Hope flickered in Zelda's chest, fragile as a candle flame. "Truly, I will look into it," Sheriff Crawford promised. "We have a circuit judge who comes through every few months. Judge Harrison is a fair man and he has granted divorces on similar grounds before. It will take time, but I think you have a strong case." The crowd that had gathered began to disperse, people coming up to the porch one by one to offer words of support. Mrs. Patterson promised to bring by some clothes that her daughter had outgrown. Samuel the blacksmith offered to install stronger locks on the Harringtons' doors. Delilah Mason invited Zelda to come to the saloon sometime for a meal, insisting that she ran a respectable establishment where women were always welcome. Through it all, Yates stayed at her side, his presence solid and reassuring. When the last of the well-wishers had left, he helped her back inside and settled her in a chair while Mrs. Harrington made tea. "I am sorry you had to go through that," Yates said quietly, kneeling beside her chair as he had earlier. "I know it could not have been easy to face him again." "I thought I would be more afraid," Zelda admitted. "And I was, but I was also angry. Angry that he tracked me here. Angry that he thinks he still has power over me. Angry that for 8 months I let him convince me I was worthless." She looked at Yates, really looked at him, taking in the concern in his eyes and the gentle strength in his features. "But when I was standing on that porch with you beside me and the whole town at my back, I felt something I have not felt in a very long time. I felt strong." Yates reached up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized had fallen. "You have always been strong, Zelda. It just took the right circumstances for you to remember it." She covered his hand with hers, holding it against her cheek. "What you said earlier before Marcus arrived, did you mean it?" "Every word," Yates said without hesitation. "I know I have no business feeling this way so soon, and I know you have a lot of healing still to do, but I cannot help how I feel when I look at you. You have gotten under my skin, Zelda Atwood, and I do not want you out." "I think you might have gotten under mine too," Zelda whispered. "It terrifies me because I swore I would never let myself be vulnerable to a man again. But you are not like Marcus. You are nothing like him." "No, I am not," Yates agreed. "And I will spend every day proving that to you if you will let me. No pressure, no expectations. Just the chance to see where this might go." Zelda leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his, breathing in the scent of leather and hay and summer sun that clung to him. "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like that very much." The days turned into weeks, and Zelda settled into her new life in Medicine Bow with surprising ease. She started her job at the railroad office, and Mr. Callahan proved to be an excellent employer who appreciated her organizational skills and neat handwriting. The work was satisfying, giving her a sense of purpose and independence she had not felt since her parents' deaths. Yates continued to visit every day, even when he had worked a long shift at the ranch. Sometimes he would bring her wildflowers he had picked on his way into town, or interesting stones he thought she might like. They would sit on the Harringtons' porch and talk for hours about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from philosophy to farming techniques to their favorite childhood memories. One evening, about 6 weeks after Zelda's arrival in Medicine Bow, Yates invited her to attend the town's summer dance. "It is nothing fancy," he said, twisting his hat in his hands. "Just a barn dance at the Petersons' ranch with some fiddle music and refreshments. But I thought it might be nice to do something normal, something fun, if you are ready for that kind of thing." Zelda hesitated. The thought of being in a crowd, of dancing and laughing like she did not have a care in the world, felt almost foreign, but it also sounded wonderful. "I do not have anything appropriate to wear," she said. "Actually, you do." Mrs. Harrington appeared with a dress draped over her arm, a beautiful creation in deep green cotton with tiny white flowers embroidered around the collar and cuffs. "I have been working on this for the past 2 weeks. I thought you might need something special." Tears sprang to Zelda's eyes as she touched the soft fabric. "Mrs. Harrington, this is too much." "Nonsense. You have been helping me around the house for weeks now, and you have become like a daughter to me. Consider it a gift from a grateful friend." Mrs. Harrington held the dress up against Zelda's frame. "I think it will fit perfectly. Why do you not try it on?" The dress did fit perfectly, hugging her waist and falling in graceful folds to her ankles. Mrs. Harrington helped her pin up her dark hair and even lent her a pair of earrings that had belonged to her own mother. When Zelda looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked pretty and healthy, nothing like the broken creature who had stumbled into town 2 months ago. Yates's expression when he saw her made the transformation complete. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. "Are you ready?" The dance was everything Zelda had hoped it would be. The Petersons' barn had been cleared out and decorated with lanterns and ribbons, and what seemed like the entire population of Medicine Bow had turned out for the occasion. A 3-piece band consisting of a fiddle, a guitar, and a squeeze box played lively tunes that had people clapping and stomping their feet. Yates proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, leading her through reels and square dances with confidence and grace. He held her carefully, respectfully, always mindful of her comfort. When a slower song started and couples paired off, he pulled her close and they swayed together while the fiddle played a sweet, melancholy melody. "Thank you for tonight," Zelda said, her hand resting on his shoulder. "I cannot remember the last time I felt this happy." "Then we should do it more often," Yates replied, his hand warm against the small of her back. "You deserve to be happy, Zelda. You deserve to have a life full of good things." "I am starting to believe that," she admitted. "For the first time since my parents died, I feel like I have a future, like there are possibilities ahead of me instead of just an endless gray road." "What kind of possibilities?" Yates asked, his eyes searching hers. Zelda felt her cheeks warm but forced herself to hold his gaze. "I think you know what kind." "I want to hear you say it," he said softly. "Possibilities that include you," Zelda whispered. "If you still want that." Instead of answering with words, Yates leaned down and kissed her, a gentle brush of his lips against hers that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. It was nothing like the brutal, demanding kisses Marcus had forced on her. This was soft and sweet and full of promise, a question rather than a demand. When they broke apart, Zelda found herself smiling for what felt like the first time in years. "That was nice," she said, her voice slightly breathless. "Just nice," Yates teased, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "All right, it was wonderful," Zelda admitted. "Can we do it again?" "As many times as you like," Yates promised and proceeded to demonstrate. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness. Zelda continued to work at the railroad office, building a small savings account that represented her independence. True to his word, Sheriff Crawford had looked into the process for obtaining a divorce, and the circuit judge had agreed to hear her case when he arrived in October. Dr. Harrington's testimony about her injuries, combined with statements from multiple townspeople about Marcus's threatening behavior, created a compelling case. Yates had asked her to be his official sweetheart shortly after the barn dance, and Zelda had accepted with a full heart. Their courtship was the subject of much cheerful gossip in Medicine Bow, with the general consensus being that they made a perfect pair. Theodore Thatcher, Yates's employer, had even come into town to meet Zelda and give his blessing to the relationship. "That boy is like a son to me," the grizzled rancher had said, shaking Zelda's hand with surprising gentleness. "I have never seen him smile the way he does when he talks about you. You make him happy, and that makes you all right in my book." In late September, Yates took Zelda to see the valley he had told her about, the place where he dreamed of starting his own ranch. They rode out on horseback, Zelda's feet having long since healed enough for such activities, and spent the afternoon exploring the land. It was beautiful country, all rolling grassland and scattered trees with a clear stream running through the middle. The mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already dusted with the first snow of the season. Zelda could picture a cabin here, a barn, corrals full of horses and cattle grazing on the hillsides. "What do you think?" Yates asked, his voice betraying his nervousness. "I think it is perfect," Zelda said honestly. "I can see why you chose this spot. The water alone would make it valuable, and there is enough grass to support a good-sized herd." "I have been talking to the land office," Yates said, dismounting and helping Zelda down from her horse. "I can file a homestead claim next month. 160 acres, all mine if I build a dwelling and cultivate the land. I have enough saved now to buy materials for a cabin and maybe 20 head of cattle to start." "That is wonderful, Yates." Zelda took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "You have worked so hard for this." "I want to show you something," Yates said, leading her to a slight rise that overlooked the entire valley. "I have been thinking about where to put the cabin. Right here would give a good view and catch the breeze in summer. I would build it with 2 bedrooms to start and a real kitchen with a proper stove. There would be room for a garden, and eventually I could add on as needed." "As needed for what?" Zelda asked, though she thought she knew where this was going. Yates turned to face her, still holding her hand. "Your divorce will be final in a few weeks. Once that happens, once you are truly free of him, I want to ask you something, but I need to know if this, all of this, is something you might want too." "You are asking if I want to be a rancher's wife," Zelda said slowly. "If I want to build a life here in this valley with you." "I am asking if you can see a future with me," Yates clarified. "I know it would not be an easy life. Starting a ranch from nothing is hard work, and there will be lean years before things get established. I cannot offer you luxury or even comfort, not at first, but I can offer you honesty and loyalty and all the love I have in me. I can promise you that I will never raise my hand to you in anger, that I will respect your opinions and value your partnership. I can promise you that whatever we build, we will build it together." Zelda felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were good tears, happy tears. "Do you know what I see when I look at this valley?" she asked. "I see a home. I see a place where children could run and play. I see hard work and satisfaction, and a life built on something real and solid. And yes, Yates Turner, I can absolutely see a future here with you." Yates swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that left her dizzy. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I have loved you since the day I found you collapsed on that street. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you hum while you work. I love everything about you." "I love you too," Zelda replied, the words coming easily now. "I was so broken when I came here, and you helped me put myself back together. You and this whole town showed me that there are good people in the world, that not all men are like Marcus. You gave me hope when I had none left." They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, sitting on the hillside and talking about their future. They discussed how big the cabin should be, where to put the barn, what kind of cattle to raise. Zelda shared her thoughts about keeping chickens and maybe some dairy cows, and Yates enthusiastically agreed. By the time they rode back to Medicine Bow, they had sketched out the rough outline of their life together. The divorce hearing took place on a crisp October morning. Judge Harrison was a silver-haired man in his 60s who listened carefully to all the testimony. Dr. Harrington presented his medical findings, describing in clinical detail the injuries Zelda had sustained. Sheriff Crawford recounted Marcus's threatening behavior and the confrontation in the street. Zelda herself testified, her voice steady as she described the 8 months of terror she had endured. Marcus did not appear to contest the proceedings. According to Sheriff Crawford, he had left South Pass City shortly after his failed attempt to reclaim Zelda, and rumor had it he was somewhere in Nevada territory. The judge declared the evidence more than sufficient and granted the divorce decree on the grounds of extreme cruelty. "You are free, Miss Atwood," Judge Harrison said, signing the final papers. "Your marriage to Marcus Dennison is hereby dissolved. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors." Zelda walked out of the courthouse feeling like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Yates was waiting on the steps and she ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. "It is over," she said, half laughing, half crying. "I am finally free." "Then I have something to ask you," Yates said, pulling back just far enough to drop to one knee. He pulled a simple gold band from his pocket, the metal gleaming in the autumn sunlight. "Zelda Atwood, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner and help me build a life in that valley? I know I already asked in a roundabout way, but I want to do this properly. I want the whole town to witness me asking for your hand." And indeed, a crowd had gathered, people spilling out of shops and offices to watch the proposal. Zelda looked around at all the faces that had become so dear to her over the past months. Mrs. Harrington dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, Mr. Callahan grinning widely, Sheriff Crawford nodding his approval, all these people who had stood behind her when she needed them most. "Yes," Zelda said clearly, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, I will marry you, Yates Turner. Nothing would make me happier." The crowd erupted in cheers as Yates slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her soundly. It was a perfect moment, one that Zelda knew she would remember for the rest of her life. They were married 3 weeks later in Medicine, Beau's small church, with seemingly the entire town in attendance. Mrs. Harrington helped Zelda sew a wedding dress in cream-colored silk, far simpler than the elaborate gown she had worn for her first wedding but infinitely more meaningful. Yates wore his best suit and looked so handsome that Zelda felt her breath catch when she saw him waiting at the altar. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Sheriff Crawford walked Zelda down the aisle, having offered to stand in for her late father. Dr. and Mrs. Harrington stood as witnesses. The minister spoke about love and partnership and building a life together, and when it came time for the vows, both Yates and Zelda spoke clearly and confidently. "I promise to love you and respect you all the days of my life," Yates said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I promise to be your partner in all things, to listen to your counsel, and to build a life with you based on honesty and trust. I promise to stand beside you through good times and hard times," Zelda replied. "I promise to be your helpmate and your friend, to work with you toward our shared dreams. I promise to love you with my whole heart, today and always." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to many eyes in the congregation. The reception afterward was a joyous affair held in the town hall, with food and music and dancing that went on well into the night. Theodore Thatcher pulled Zelda aside at one point, pressing an envelope into her hands. "That boy is too proud to accept charity, so I am giving this to you," he said gruffly. "Call it a wedding present. There is enough there to help you stock that ranch properly. Buy good breeding stock and do not stint on the materials for your cabin. Yates has given me 8 years of loyal service. I would like to see him succeed. Inside the envelope was $2,000 in banknotes, a staggering sum. Zelda tried to protest, but Theodore waved her off. "I am an old man with no children of my own. Let me help you young folks get started, and do not you dare tell Yates where it came from. As far as he is concerned, you are just better at managing money than he thought." Zelda hugged the old rancher, overwhelmed by his generosity. It seemed Medicine Bow was determined to ensure their success. Yates had arranged for them to spend their wedding night at the hotel in town, a luxury that made Zelda feel like a princess. When they were finally alone in the small but clean room, she felt a flutter of nervousness. Her wedding night with Marcus had been painful and humiliating. She knew Yates would never hurt her intentionally, but 8 months of bad memories were hard to overcome. Yates seemed to sense her anxiety. "We do not have to do anything tonight," he said gently, taking her hands in his. "We have the rest of our lives together. There is no rush." "I want to," Zelda said, and she did. She wanted to replace the bad memories with good ones, wanted to learn what it meant to be with a man who loved her. "I am just a little nervous." "So am I," Yates admitted with a slight smile. "I have never been with anyone before. I wanted to wait until I found someone special." The revelation made Zelda love him even more. "Then we will figure it out together," she said, reaching up to kiss him. What followed was gentle and sweet and nothing like what she had experienced before. Yates took his time, constantly checking to make sure she was comfortable, that she wanted to continue. When they finally came together, it was with a sense of rightness that made Zelda's heart soar. This was what it was supposed to be like, she thought. This partnership, this mutual care and pleasure. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow hotel bed, talking quietly about their future. Yates stroked her hair and told her about his plans for the ranch. Zelda shared her ideas about keeping bees and maybe starting a small vegetable garden to sell produce in town. They talked until they fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms. The next morning, they headed out to the valley to begin building their new life. Several men from town had volunteered to help with the cabin raising, and over the next 2 weeks, a sturdy structure took shape on the hillside Yates had chosen. It was not large, just 4 rooms to start, but it was solid and well built with a good stone fireplace and real glass windows. Zelda threw herself into making the cabin a home. She sewed curtains for the windows and braided rugs for the floors. Mrs. Harrington gave her some furniture from her attic, including a beautiful oak table and chairs. Delilah Mason contributed a set of dishes and cooking pots. By the time they moved in, the cabin was cozy and welcoming. Yates filed his homestead claim and used Theodore's secret gift to buy 40 head of good breeding stock and 2 sturdy horses. He built a barn and corrals with help from Samuel the blacksmith and several other men from town. Zelda started her garden and acquired a dozen chickens that provided eggs for both their table and to sell in Medicine Bow. That first winter was hard. Snow came early and stayed late, and more than once Yates had to dig paths through drifts taller than Zelda's head just to reach the barn. But they had laid in plenty of supplies, and the cabin stayed warm and dry. On the coldest nights, they would sit by the fire and Zelda would read aloud from the books she had borrowed from Dr. Harrington, while Yates worked on repairing tack or carving wooden tools. In January, Zelda realized she was expecting a child. The realization filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had not thought about having children, had been too focused on simply surviving and then on building her new life. But now that it was happening, she found herself desperately wanting this baby, this tangible symbol of her and Yates's love. Yates was overjoyed when she told him, picking her up and spinning her around despite her protests, that he should be careful. "We are going to be parents," he said wonderingly. "You are going to be a mother, I am going to be a father." "Are you scared?" Zelda asked. "Terrified," Yates admitted, "but also so happy I can barely breathe. We are going to do this right, Zelda. Our children are going to grow up knowing they are loved and safe. They are never going to doubt for one moment that they are wanted and valued." "No," Zelda agreed. "They never will, Doctor." Harrington came out to the ranch regularly to check on Zelda's progress, declaring that both mother and baby were healthy and thriving. Mrs. Harrington helped her make tiny gowns and blankets, and the women of medicine threw her a surprise party where they showered her with gifts and advice. The baby was born on a warm September evening, almost exactly a year after Zelda had stumbled into Medicine Bow. The birth was long and difficult, but Dr. Harrington and Mrs. Harrington were there to help, and Yates never left her side. When it was finally over and the doctor placed a squalling, red-faced infant in her arms, Zelda felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "It is a boy," Dr. Harrington announced with a smile. "A healthy, strong boy." "A son," Yates said, his voice thick with emotion. He touched the baby's tiny hand, and the infant immediately grasped his finger. "Hello there, little man. I am your father." They named him William Theodore Turner, after Sheriff Crawford and Theodore Thatcher, the two men who had helped them so much in building their life together. Billy, as they called him, was a good baby who rarely fussed and seemed to enjoy being carried around the ranch in a sling while Zelda worked. The ranch prospered over the next few years. The cattle multiplied, and Yates gained a reputation for raising quality stock. Zelda's garden expanded, and she began selling preserves and honey at the store in Medicine Bow. They added onto the cabin, building 2 more bedrooms and a proper parlor. A daughter arrived 2 years after Billy, a red-faced little girl with her father's eyes whom they named Hannah Marie. Another son, James, followed 2 years later. Marcus Dennison was never heard from again. Sheriff Crawford eventually received word that he had been killed in a saloon fight in Virginia City, Nevada, shot by a man he had accused of cheating at cards. Zelda felt nothing but relief at the news. That chapter of her life was closed, and she had no desire to revisit it even in memory. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates took Zelda back to the hillside where he had proposed, the spot where their cabin now stood. The valley had changed dramatically over the decade. Where there had once been empty grassland, there were now fences and outbuildings, cattle grazing peacefully, and a vegetable garden bursting with late summer produce. They could see the children playing in the yard, Billy at 12 already tall and responsible, Hannah at 10 teaching James the proper way to feed the chickens. "You remember standing here 10 years ago?" Yates asked, his arm around Zelda's waist, "when I asked if you could see a future with me." "I remember," Zelda said, leaning into his warmth. "I was so scared and so hopeful at the same time. I wanted to believe that life could be good again, but I was not sure I dared." "And now?" Yates asked. "Now I know that life can be more than just good, it can be wonderful." Zelda turned to face him, reaching up to cup his weathered face. "You gave me everything I had lost. You gave me safety and security and love. You gave me a home and a family. You gave me myself back." "You did the same for me," Yates replied. "Before I found you, I was just going through the motions, working and saving without any real idea of what I was working toward. You gave me purpose, a reason to build something lasting. You made me want to be a better man." "You were already a good man," Zelda said. "One of the best I have ever known." They kissed as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. From the cabin below came the sound of children's laughter, and Zelda thought about how far she had come from that desperate, frightened woman, who had stumbled into Medicine Bow with nothing but hope and determination. She had survived the worst that life could throw at her and come out the other side stronger. She had found love and safety in the most unexpected place. She had built a life she could be proud of, surrounded by people who cared about her. The town of Medicine Bow had stood behind her when she needed it most, and in doing so, they had given her the chance to become the person she was always meant to be. "You have any regrets?" Yates asked softly. Zelda thought about the question carefully. She could regret the wasted year with Marcus, the pain and fear she had endured. She could regret the innocence she had lost and the scars that would never fully fade. But if she had not gone through all of that, she would never have found herself in Medicine Bow. She would never have met Yates or built this beautiful life. "No," she said finally. "No regrets. Everything that happened led me here to you, to our children, to this life. I would not change any of it because I would not want to risk losing what we have." "Good," Yates said, pulling her close. "Because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zelda Turner." "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me," Zelda replied. As they walked back down the hill toward their home, toward the sounds of children playing and dinner cooking and all the beautiful chaos of family life, Zelda felt a profound sense of gratitude. She thought about the people who had helped her along the way, Dr. and Mrs. Harrington, who had taken her in and cared for her, Mr. Callahan, who had given her a job and independence, Sheriff Crawford, who had stood up to Marcus and helped her get her divorce, Theodore Thatcher, whose secret generosity had given them such a solid start. All the men and women of Medicine Bow who had rallied around a stranger simply because it was the right thing to do. She had been blessed beyond measure, and she knew it. Not everyone who fled from violence and abuse found such a soft place to land. Not everyone found love and healing and a second chance at happiness. But she had, and she would spend the rest of her life being grateful for that gift. Years continued to pass, measured in the changing seasons and the growing children. Billy grew into a fine young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Hannah showed a talent for healing and often accompanied Dr. Harrington on his rounds, learning the medical trade. James had his mother's head for numbers and talked about becoming a banker someday. 2 more children joined the family, twin girls born when Zelda was 33. They named them Sarah and Grace, and they completed the family in a way that felt just right. The cabin had to be expanded again, and Yates joked that if they had any more children, they would need to build a second house. Zelda continued to work her garden and sell her goods in town, but she also found time to help other women who found themselves in situations similar to what she had escaped. Over the years, Medicine Bow gained a reputation as a safe place for women fleeing violence, and more than once Zelda opened her home to someone who needed refuge. She and Yates would provide shelter and support while Sheriff Crawford dealt with the legal aspects of the situation. It gave Zelda a sense of purpose beyond just her own family. She could take the pain she had experienced and use it to help others, to ensure that other women had the same chance she had been given. Yates supported her completely in this work, understanding better than most why it mattered so much. Theodore Thatcher passed away when Zelda was 35, leaving his ranch to Yates with instructions that it be merged with their existing holdings. The combined property made them one of the largest ranching operations in that part of Wyoming, and though it meant more work, it also meant greater security for their children's future. Dr. and Mrs. Harrington lived to see their adopted town grow from a rough railroad settlement into a proper community with a school, 2 churches, and even a small theater. They were beloved by everyone who knew them, and when Dr. Harrington finally retired at 70, Hannah Turner took over his practice, becoming one of the few female doctors in Wyoming territory. Sheriff Crawford served the people of Medicine Bow until he was too old to ride, at which point Billy Turner took over the position. It seemed fitting somehow. The son of the woman the whole town had protected now protecting the town in return. Wyoming achieved statehood in 1890, and Zelda celebrated along with everyone else, proud to be part of a state that had given women the right to vote long before most of the country even considered the idea. She cast her ballot in every election, taking the responsibility seriously and teaching her daughters to do the same. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the town of Medicine Bow threw a party for Yates and Zelda Turner. It seemed like everyone they had ever known was there, including several women whose lives Zelda had helped change over the years. There were speeches and toasts, and more than one person spoke about the day a battered woman had stumbled into town, and how the decision to stand behind her had defined Medicine Bow in the best possible way. "We are not just a town that protects its own," Mayor Patterson said, raising his glass. "We are a town that decides who our own are based on character and need, not just birth or circumstance." Zelda Turner showed us what courage looks like, and Yates Turner showed us what true manhood means. Together, they have been an example to us all. Zelda stood to respond, her voice steady even though her eyes were damp. 25 years ago, I came to this town with nothing but the clothes on my back and more fear than hope. You took me in, protected me, and gave me the chance to build a new life. You stood behind me when you had no reason to accept basic human decency. I can never repay that debt, but I have tried to honor it by living well and helping others the way I was helped. This town is not just where I live, it is where my heart is. You are not just my neighbors, you are my family. Thank you for everything you have given me." Yates pulled her close and kissed her while the crowd cheered. Their children stood nearby with their own growing families. Billy and his wife had 3 children. Hannah was engaged to a young lawyer from Cheyenne. James was in his first year of college in Laramie, studying business. The twins were 17 and beautiful, full of plans and dreams. This was her legacy, Zelda thought. Not just her children, though they were certainly the greatest joy of her life, but also the example she had set, the lives she had touched, the difference she had made by refusing to let her past define her future. As she looked around at all the faces gathered in the town hall, some aged and some young, some familiar from that first desperate day and some new, Zelda felt a profound sense of peace. She had survived. She had thrived. She had loved and been loved in return. She had built something lasting and good. The road from that broken woman stumbling down a canyon to this moment had been long and sometimes difficult. But she had walked it with her head high, supported by a man who loved her and a community that valued her. And in the end, that had made all the difference. Years turned to decades. Zelda and Yates grew old together, their hair silvering and their steps slowing but their love as strong as ever. They sat on the porch of their ranch house in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains and counting their blessings. 15 grandchildren at last count, with more on the way. A thriving ranch that would provide for generations to come. The respect and affection of an entire community. On a warm summer evening in 1905, Yates passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 70. Zelda held his hand as he drew his last breath, whispering words of love and gratitude for the 50 years they had shared. The entire town of Medicine Bow turned out for his funeral, and the procession of mourners stretched for a mile. Zelda grieved deeply, but without bitterness. She had been blessed with a love that many people never found, with decades of happiness and partnership. She had no right to complain that it had to end eventually. That was simply the nature of life. She lived another 12 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, watching Medicine Bow continue to grow and change. On her 80th birthday, the town held a celebration in her honor, recognizing her not just as a beloved resident, but as a symbol of survival and resilience. "My life has taught me many things," Zelda said in her speech that day, her voice still strong despite her advanced age. "It has taught me that people can survive terrible things and still find joy. It has taught me that community matters, that standing up for those in need is never wrong. It has taught me that love, real love, is about respect and partnership and choosing each other every day. But most of all, it has taught me that it is never too late to start over, to build something new, to become the person you were always meant to be." She paused, looking out at all the faces watching her. "When I came to Medicine Bow in 1879, I was 22 years old and broken in ways I thought could never be fixed. This town and the people in it, especially one stubborn cowboy named Yates Turner, showed me that I was wrong. You gave me my life back. And I have spent every day since then trying to deserve that gift." Zelda Atwood Turner passed away peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1917, surrounded by family in the house she and Yates had built together. Her funeral was the largest Medicine Bow had ever seen, with people traveling from all over Wyoming to pay their respects. She was buried next to Yates on a hillside overlooking the valley, a simple granite marker bearing both their names and the words "Together Always." The ranch continued under Billy's management, staying in the Turner family for generations. The town of Medicine Bow never forgot the woman who had stumbled into their midst one hot June day, or the choice they had made to stand behind her. Her story became part of the town's history, told and retold as an example of what a community could accomplish when it chose compassion over indifference. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, though those were certainly significant achievements, but the reminder that every person has value, that everyone deserves safety and respect, that standing up for those in need is always the right choice. That was what Zelda and Yates Turner taught Medicine Bow, and what Medicine Bow passed on to future generations. Their love story, born from tragedy but flowering into something beautiful and lasting, stood as proof that second chances are real, that healing is possible, and that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best. It was a story of courage and hope, of a town that stood behind a stranger in need, and of two people who built a life together based on love, respect, and partnership. And decades after both were gone, when people in Medicine Bow told the story of Zelda and Yates, they always ended it the same way. "That is what love looks like," they would say. "That is what it means to do right by each other. That is the example we should all follow." In a small cemetery on a hillside overlooking a beautiful valley, two simple graves stood side by side, weathered by wind and sun, but tended with care by those who remembered. Fresh flowers appeared regularly, placed there by descendants and townspeople alike who wanted to honor the memory of a cowboy and the woman he had saved, who had saved him right back, and who together had shown an entire community what it meant to be truly good. The legacy they left behind was not measured in acres or cattle or even children and grandchildren, though those were all plentiful. It was measured in the lives they touched, the example they set, and the love they shared. It was measured in the knowledge that one person's choice to help a stranger in need could change not just that stranger's life, but the entire character of a community. That was the true story of Zelda and Yates Turner, of Medicine Bow, Wyoming, and of what happened when a cowboy took in a woman fleeing her violent husband and the whole town stood behind him. It was a story of survival and healing, of courage and compassion, and above all, of love that endured beyond even death itself. The valley still stands as they knew it, though much has changed over the years. The ranch continues under new management, and Medicine Bow has grown from a rough railroad town into a thriving community. But the spirit of those early days when neighbors looked out for each other and strangers were welcomed rather than feared still remains. It remains because Zelda and Yates Turner, through their lives and their love, showed everyone who knew them what was possible when people chose kindness over cruelty, community over isolation, and hope over despair. And on quiet summer evenings, when the sun sets over the Wyoming mountains and the wind whispers through the grass, it is easy to imagine their spirits still there, standing together on the hillside they loved, looking out over the life they built and knowing that it was good.